Hi everybody, it's Birdie. Welcome back to Positive Bluebird. I'm going to read a 5-minute fairy tale. Long ago in a far-off land, a princess was born with hair as black as night, skin as white as snow, and lips the color of rubies. She was called Snow White. As the princess grew, she became more beautiful every year. Her stepmother, the queen, was also very beautiful. The queen was so vain, she had a magical mirror made. Every day she looked into the mirror and asked, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the fairest of them all?" Then the mirror would answer, "You, my queen, are fairest." And the queen was pleased. When Snow White grew to be a young maiden, the queen asked, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the fairest of us all?" The mirror replied, "You, my queen, my lovely bee, but Snow White is fairer still than thee." The queen was very angry. She could not stand to have anyone be prettier than herself. She called a woodsman and ordered him to take Snow White away and kill her. The man, fearing for his life, took the girl deep into the forest, but could not bring himself to carry out the order. Instead, he left Snow White there alone. Snow White had never been all by herself in the woods before. Around her were strange noises and scary shadows. She was so scared, she began to run. Tree branches caught at her back and her hair as she ran through the forest. Snow White ran as fast as she could until she came to a little clearing amongst the trees. There she saw a small cottage with a red roof. "Maybe someone here will be able to help me," sighed Snow White with relief. She knocked and knocked on the front door. When no one answered, Snow White went inside. There she found a tiny little table set with 7 plates. Snow White was very hungry after being in the woods, so she nibbled a few bites of food from each of the little plates. After her snack, Snow White found a little bedroom with 7 tiny beds. Suddenly, Snow White realized she was very, very sleepy. "I'll just take a little nap," she yawned. She crawled into a bed and was soon fast asleep. In this cottage lived 7 dwarfs. Soon after Snow White fell asleep, the dwarfs came back from work. They quickly discovered that someone was in their house. Soon the dwarfs saw the beautiful young maiden in their bedroom. When Snow White awoke, she was happy to meet her 7 new friends. She told them about the evil queen. The 7 dwarfs felt sorry for Snow White and asked her to stay. She took care of the cottage, and the dwarfs gave her food, friendship, and shelter in return. Snow White was happy living with the dwarfs. Snow White was happy living with the dwarfs that she came to love them all, so much that she forgot about the evil queen, who was so jealous of her beauty. The evil queen knew that Snow White had not perished in the woods and decided to kill the girl herself. The queen disguised herself as an ugly old woman and searched the woods for Snow White. One day, the evil queen found the dwarf's cottage and she called out, "Pretty belts for sale! Pretty belts for sale!" Snow White opened the door to the ugly woman. Snow White tried on one of the lovely belts. The queen pulled the belt so tight around the girl's waist that she fell down as if she were dead. The queen threw off her old woman's costume and shouted, "I will always be the fairest of all." When the dwarfs returned home that day, they found Snow White laying in their house. "Poor Snow White," they cried. Right away they saw that the girl's belt was too tight and cut it off with a knife. She began to breathe again and told them what happened. The dwarfs realized that the old woman must have been the evil queen, and they told Snow White to be careful. "Snow White, you must never, never open the door or to the window to anybody," said the little dwarf. Back at the castle, the evil queen learned that the princess was still alive. She was furious. "I must be rid of Snow White forever," she cried. The queen used all her evil magic to make a poisoned apple. Then the queen thought of another disguise. She dressed herself as a poor woman selling fruit and went once more to see Snow White. The queen offered the girl the apple, and it looked so delicious that Snow White could not resist it. Snow White bit into the fruit. She instantly fell down as if she was dead. The dwarfs could not wake Snow White, but she looked as healthy and as pretty as if she were comfortably sleeping. They laid her in a glass case so they could not touch her. And this way they could watch over her. The queen could not touch her either. One day a prince was hunting in the woods. He came upon Snow White laying in the glass and asked the dwarfs who she was. "She is our dear Snow White, put to sleep by the spell of the evil queen," replied one dwarf sadly. The prince gazed into the glass case. "This is the most beautiful princess I've ever seen," he said. Instantly, the prince fell deeply in love. The prince opened the glass case. As he lifted her up, Snow White slowly opened her eyes and looked at her prince. When the dwarfs learned that Snow White was alive, they danced with joy and happily agreed that she should marry this handsome prince. As for the queen, her hatred made her so ugly that she could not bear to look in the mirror ever again. The end.